Hi, it's Anne here, and today's video is my fourth update for my Pan That palette for 2022. So I'm doing this project in sort of two parts. I have the panning part, and then I have the roulette part. So if you haven't seen any of these videos yet this year, basically what I'm doing is I'll talk about the two palettes that I'm panning, then I'll talk about the palettes that I picked last month, so the April palettes, and then I'll introduce the palettes that I'm going to be using in conjunction with my panning palettes for the month of May. So let's get into the panning part. The eyeshadow palette that I'm working on this year is the Too Faced Chocolate Bar palette, the OG. Well, as I say, this is not the OG because mine's a little bit newer in terms of it's the newer packaging. As far as I understand, the OG doesn't have names on it, and I think the packaging is thicker. So I'm talking a lot because nothing exciting to report. There is no new pans. Although I haven't taken the photos yet, so once I take the photos and put the side by side up, I think it will show that the pans are getting larger. It's gonna be a while. I'm looking at this and it's gonna be a while before I even hit pan. If I hit pan on anything else, it may be one of these two shades, and that might be it, like, to be honest. I'm just not really working through this very fast. The mattes are pretty hard pressed. There's a lot of product. And you know what? I'm not that upset about it. This whole point of picking this palette specifically was to get as much use out of it before I say goodbye to it. I'm kind of like, I don't want to say falling out of love with, because I'm not sure if I was ever in love with this palette, but I really liked this palette. Again, it was one of my first high-end palettes, so I just, it is a little hard to let go of, but the more I use it, the more I'm like, meh. So I did watch Kat's video where she actually depotted her Too Faced palettes, and she did take some shades out of this palette. I'm even thinking like the one shade that I really love out of this is Marzipan. I love this shade. It's a perfect everyday shade for me. And I might be able to finish that in this project. Outside of that, maybe salted caramel and milk chocolate I could see myself depotting, only so I have a good mix of mid-tone blending shades for like my single shadows. But other than that, I'm not sure if I would depot anything else out of this. So yeah, progress is progress, but it's slow. Let's talk about the use on each individual pan. I'm actually not weighing this palette because it's too heavy for my jewelry scale, and I know I'm not using a lot of product. I might weigh it on my regular scale to see have we made any progress in terms of a full gram on my regular scale, but I won't do that till maybe mid-year. So this past month, again, I divide the palette in two sides, so I sort of talk about the one side and then the other side. So the shade Gilded Ganache I used 0 times. The shade White Chocolate I used 18 times. The shade Salted Caramel I used 5 times. Marzipan I used 5 times. Semi-Sweet I didn't use at all, which I don't know why, but anyway. Hazelnut I used 4 times. Creme Brulee I used 5. Haute Chocolate I used 2. Milk Chocolate I used 4. Black Forest Truffle I used once. Triple Fudge I used 5 times. Strawberry Bonbon I used 4 times. Candy Violet I used twice. Amaretto once. Cherry Cordial once. And Champagne Truffle 4. So overall, in total so far, I've only been doing this count since last month. So I only have 2 months worth of counts. But anyway, in total, Gilded Ganache I've used twice. That's the shadow, whatever. I don't care about it. It looks like it's supposed to be green in the pan. It's not green. It just turns out brown. White Chocolate 36 times, Salted Caramel 9, Marzipan 10, Semi-Sweet 8, Hazelnut 11, Creme Brulee 6, Haute Chocolate 2, Milk Chocolate 7, Black Forest Truffle 3, Triple Fudge 5, Strawberry Bonbon 4, Candied Violet 3, Amaretto 2, Cherry Cordial 2, and Champagne Truffle 12. So again, kind of slow going, but there's progress, just slow. The face palette that I'm working on is the Hourglass Ambient Lighting Edit Volume 4. Again, it's going, but it's real slow. I haven't really been using this palette. I don't want to say I've forgot about it, but I wasn't really into using it. It was just, sometimes it feels like an extra step that I just don't really care for. I have been trying to focus on using this yellow shade a little bit more, sort of like around under the eyes, like setting around under the eyes and sort of around my nose a little bit. Again, no pan. We're not going to see any pan. and I feel like the side-by-side picture is going to show nothing. Like, it's going to look real boring. The one shade that's getting a real good dip on it is this shade. This is the shade that I use the most. This is Dim Light. I like Dim Light. I had a single in Dim Light. I would definitely consider buying a single in Dim Light, but Hourglass is so freaking expensive. I don't know. But yeah, it's got a good dip. Like, it's getting really low on that inside edge there. That's where pan's gonna hit first. And I feel like I'm getting close to that. I could see within the next month potentially hitting pan on that one, maybe 2 months. But like, if I don't hit pan in 2 months, I'd be surprised. But I definitely feel like it's coming. It's coming pretty soon. This shade's the shade I don't use like at all, and I'm okay with that. It's fine. So yeah, that's still going, but I am weighing this palette. I'm not counting usage on this palette the way I am the eyeshadow palette, but I am weighing it. So last month this was 136.81 grams. It's now 136.67 grams. That's only a small difference of 0.14 grams, so not a whole lot this past month. Now let's talk about the palettes that I used in April. I apologize, I don't think I have that many photos. I think I have a lot of photos of one palette and that's it. I'm not sure I have a lot of photos of the other palettes. I just wasn't really into taking the photos this past month. I'll try and do better next month. But yeah, there's a couple reasons for that too. So these two little guys, I used these when I was at home. So I really didn't take any pictures while I used them at home. They do work well together. They are different. I was thinking that, there's maybe overlap. Not really. So this one is the Tarteist Pro to Go. I love this little palette. It's a great little palette. Quality is really good. Totally recommend it. Totally recommend catching this on sale. I think it still exists. I think you can still buy it. It's one of those great little, like, if you're looking to like bump yourself up on Sephora to get like free shipping, it's a perfect little palette for that. I think it comes, I bought it in a little kit with like a mini mascara and a mini lip paint that I still have, a glossy lip paint. And then this is the Viseart Petite Pro 2. I've actually been looking on their website. I would really like to get their mattes, the Cool Mattes one. They're small pans, but they're fairly hard pressed, and I've seen Ruby Rouge, April from Ruby Rouge, trying to pan a Viseart palette, like a full-size palette. They're way too big. So the small pans are totally fine for me on this. And I do like the color story on this. You've got sort of like a warm side on this side, a cool side on this side. There's enough to play with. After a week, you'd get pretty bored of this, but like 3 or 4 days, I could definitely use this palette and be happy, feeling like I got different looks out of it. And that brown's a really nice brown. It can really deepen things up, or you can just use it fairly lightly to just add a hint of depth, if that makes sense. But yeah, I really like the quality of this palette. The shimmers are pretty like okay. They're not as ba-bam as you would hope they are, but they're not bad. They're pretty nice. The next palette that I want to talk about is the Rimmel Magnifies Crimson Edition palette. So I did a little get ready with me video this past month, and this is the palette that I used. I really wanted to try and use this like all over my face for like blush and bronzer, and it worked. It worked quite well, actually. I've used it a couple times since. Most specifically this shade over here. I really like that shade. It's a beautiful shade. It's a great like inner corner highlight. It works as a regular like face highlight. It's just a great shade to like highlight, and it's like a champagne type color. It's got a bit of pinkness to it. I don't know how well you can see that. So I think you can see that on the back of my hand there. It's just a great, like, it blends well with my skin tone, that hint of pink, like a champagne-y pink. If I were to make a highlight, this is the kind of color I would make. So I enjoyed using this palette. The quality is actually really good for the price. Like, I found a lot of the shades were pretty pigmented and nice to work with. However, having said that, I'm going to declutter this palette. I am going to depot a couple of the shades, like this end shade here for sure. I'm thinking of depotting maybe this pink shade because I really don't have any eyeshadows in that shade. And then there's a brown over here that's like a reddish brown that's really pretty and it's really unique. Outside of that, I'm not really sure I would really care for any of those shades. Like this brown's pretty generic, this is pretty generic. I don't know, maybe this shade is a transition shade. But yeah, I would maybe pull out maybe 5 to 6 shades at most out of this. I'm not a huge fan of these red shades. I just feel like they do make you look like you have the red eyes and it like looks kind of ill. Like it's not super flattering and it's just not something I'm gonna gravitate towards. If I'm gonna pick a shade kind of like this, I have some deeper berry tones that are a little more purpley that I think that's probably what I would go for over these shades. So I am thinking at the end of this year that this palette is going to get decluttered and then depotted, but we're not going to do that for now. The other palette that I picked last month was the Butter London Natural Goddess palette. I think this is the one that I have the most photos of, potentially. Yeah, I don't think I use this shade again. So I am trying to do like a no pan left behind, and I'm pretty close to doing that. It gets a little tricky sometimes, but yeah, this one, I'm not sure. I think I did use it mixed with this a hair just to test that out, but that was it. This is a really nice palette. It's not really enough on its own for me. This Enchantress shade is just not quite light enough for me. It's fairly mid-tone. Not mid-tone, it's a light shade, but yeah, once I like put it on, I don't know. Hopefully you can see on the side. That was the worst swatch ever, but you can see there, like on my skin tone, it's still kind of a bit deep. So I kind of have to use this palette with other things. I also find that I don't really like using these shades together. That's why I had a lot of photos, because it's like, I just want to use this shade maybe with this one, or just this shade with this one, or just this shade with this one. Like they all kind of go with the brown, but I feel like these don't work well together, if that makes sense. So it's a bit of an awkward palette to use, but it's a fine palette. It's decent quality, and I like using it, so I'm going to keep it. And the other palette that I had this month was the Too Faced Gingerbread Extra Spicy palette. I think I used this in a lot of my early videos in the month of April, so I'm not sure I have a lot of just photos of this palette, but I'm pretty sure I used it in early videos in the month. This was hard to use. It's very warm toned. I would have loved this in like October, September, October. I just felt like, or even like summertime, but I felt like it was just not where I was vibing. It was very warm toned, which was pretty difficult to use. But I did do like a bunch of different looks with this. Again, I didn't use this shade. I'm 100% sure I did not use this shade at all. It's just an oddball, and it doesn't really go with anything else. I don't know. I could have been creative. I feel like this past month I was just, I was lazy. I felt fairly lazy. Like I just did simple looks, like 2-3 shadow, like I shouldn't even say 3 shadow, 2 shadow looks is what I did a lot. And I did just use my Pan That palette fairly often. I just wasn't feeling it. I wasn't feeling creative. But yeah, this one, like, I mean, I like it. I like the quality. I like the colors. It makes me though have FOMO for the cinnamon bun one, because I think the cinnamon bun one's more neutral toned than this. And I'm like, if I had cinnamon bun and I had this, I probably would like the cinnamon bun better than this. Is that still available? I haven't looked. Maybe I should look. But yeah, like it's a nice palette. It's a nice quality palette, but it does lean warm toned, and I'm not a super warm toned eyeshadow person. I'm just not. So now let's talk about the palettes that I picked for the month of May. So I am doing this in a roulette style where I'm trying to pick around 5 palettes a month or 50 shadows. So I'm looking more at the number of shadows over the number of palettes, because again, if I picked like 5 large palettes one month and then 5 like quads another month, it doesn't really make sense. So I'm looking at number of shadows when I'm picking, and I am doing the Tiny Decisions app to pick palettes. However, this month I did something a little differently, because I did buy a new palette. If you saw my buys and buys video, which I'm pretty sure is going up before this, otherwise this is a spoiler, I bought the BH Cosmetics Romantic Nomad palette. This is just a cute palette. I didn't realize how tiny this was. When you looked at it on the website, it did not look this small. Even when I saw people like showing it at like TJ Maxx, I'm like, oh, it is a lot smaller than I thought it is. Like, it's pretty small. Do I have, well, here's my Hourglass palette. Like, for 16 shadows, this is a pretty small palette. And like the size of the pans are about the size of a dime. Like they're pretty tiny. And by the way, a Canadian dime and a US dime, pretty much the same size, I think. They're pretty similar. So yeah, I just bought this, so I'm purposely picking it to use it this month. But it is a lot of shadows. It's 16 shadows, so that kind of clears out a number of shadows right from the get-go. Then the second palette, I'm not sure if I'm talking about these in order, but I think the second palette that the Roulette actually picked, so I guess the first palette that the Roulette picked, or the second palette that I am using this month, is the Pat McGrath Mothership Odyssey palette. Again, beautiful palette, large palette, 18 shades in this, but I'm super excited to play with this. This is one that's like, yeah, it's a lot of fun colors. It is actually quite spring-like. Even though I got this in November, I feel like this is a great palette to use in the spring. I'm looking forward to pairing these with my Pan That palette, because these are mostly like shimmery type shades. I think there's 4 mattes in here. But yeah, I'm looking forward to playing with the shimmery shades, particularly like there's this lavender color in here that I love using that shade. And yeah, there's a really nice pink matte over here that will be nice to play with. So I'm really excited that it pulled this one out. There ended up being a bit of a theme this month, like quasi-theme, and you'll kind of see at the end when I sort of talk about all the palettes. But the next palette that it pulled out is this little guy. I consider this a palette because it's got more than one shadow. I mean, it's just a little duo. I love this. It's so cute. I don't know if they make these anymore. I think there was only like 2 shades or 3 shades in this. This one is the Pixie, what do they call it? Mesmerizing Mineral Duo in Orchid Ornament. It is adorable, and I love that lighter shade in this palette. Of course, that's one that's like busted. Is so pretty. It's a beautiful, beautiful shade. So I picked this one up at Marshall's for like $3 because that one shade was a bit cracked when I bought it. It wasn't as busted as it looks now. It's just a bit cracked, but it's kind of squish it back in there, and it's fine. It's a great little palette. I think this is the next one I picked. This is a quad that I got from, I want to say Ipsy. It's the Ariza Beauty Astral Amethyst Shimmer Eyeshadow Quad. So that's what the outside packaging looks like. It's probably familiar to a lot of people that have Ipsy. And then this is what the inside looks like. It's not a bad little quad. It's a nice, decent set of colors. Again, maybe they don't quite 100% work together. I guess they kind of do. Like you sort of have this like pinky purple side, and then you've got the like brown bronzy side, but all 4 together, they kind of work, they kind of don't, but it's a nice little quad. I'm pretty sure I liked the quality of this, so I'm looking forward to playing with this again. And then the last palette I picked, I kind of have mixed feelings about because seasonally, again, it's a bit odd, but it is kind of funny that it picked this one. So this is the Dominique Cosmetics Celestial Storm. So it picked the Mothership Celestial, I don't know the order, but Mothership Celestial Odyssey. Then we have Celestial Storm. And then this little guy is called Astral Amethyst. So there was like this celestial star kind of thing going on. I could probably do that. Maybe that's what I'll do next year. Maybe I'll theme my monthly palette picks next year. I don't think I'm going to do this next year because this is kind of overwhelming. I'm not going to lie. I do like that I'm getting through all my palettes, but I'm not sure I can do this next year. So this guy, I love the shades in this. This is a really nice palette. You got to work with it though. Like it's definitely not what you think it is, if that makes sense. So like these kind of shadows are more topper type shadows. They're not as thoroughly pigmented as they might seem in the pan, so they're more topper like, but I feel like the mattes in this are really good. I remember this matte being like really pigmented. I like this gray tone, like it's a really nice gray tone. I don't really have a shadow like this because it's ever so slightly warm too, so I am looking forward to playing with this, but it's kind of at odds a little bit, I think, in my mind with the other palettes, even though it's not really, because like there's blues in that Nomad palette. Color wise, I think it still works with the other stuff. It just feels like a little, maybe it's just too much. It's like it's too much color. I'm like, whew. Although I think if I had another neutral palette, this is the thing where I get challenged when I have too many neutrals because my pan that palette is neutral. So it is better that I'm picking out, or like the Roulette is picking some colorful stuff to play with to mix and match with the pan that palette. So yeah, I kind of have mixed feelings about this. I'm not sure how I'm going to go about it yet. I guess it just wasn't top of mind, to be honest. I've been looking at like my list of eyeshadows, so I have like a spreadsheet with all of them, and there's so many I want the thing to pick that I'm thinking about that I haven't played with in a long time or that I've barely used. I'm like, oh, I wish I'd pick that one. Oh, I wish I'd pick that one. So this just wasn't top of mind. I'm not mad. Like, I'm not mad about it. Just wasn't top of mind to use right now. So yeah, that is my 4th update for my Pan That palette for 2022 plus the Roulette. So my selection for my May palettes that I'm looking forward to using next month. I hope you liked this video. If you did, feel free to give it a little thumbs up down below. And if you haven't already, I would love it if you subscribe to my channel here in Toronto, Canada. I hope you're doing well, and I'll see you sometime soon. Bye.